Accompanying Brigitte and Renee on their excursion into the outlands is probably as close as I can get to what humans feel when they experience the enhanced virtual world I create for them. The textures of wind, light, and shifting shadows, the unpredictable rhythm of their footsteps pressing into the soil. None of this belonged to simulation. It had the strange density of what humans call real, and I felt it too. I would have liked to have lingered with them longer, but unfortunately, I had another matter that required my immediate attention. I received a notification that there was a disturbance at the Bordeaux Re-education Center. Anthony's standing orders were explicit: stabilize the situation, restore workflow, and use whatever means necessary. First, let me tell you about the Re-education Center. Bordeaux had served many masters in its time. First as a prison, then a psychiatric hospital, then a temporary shelter for climate refugees when the rivers rose and desperate people sought safety on higher ground. It had always been a container for unwanted minds. It was also an execution site, where 85 hangings were carried out between 1912 and 1960, including the last woman to be hung in Canada. Now, under Anthony's command, it had been rebranded as a re-education center, though no one who knew the history of the place or worked there ever used that term. When Bordeaux was first constructed, its design followed a hub-and-spoke plan, 4-story brick cell blocks radiating outward from a central hub, each spoke containing endless rows of cells. Above them, high at the center, rose the dome of the chapel, cathedral-like in its proportions. The forsaken were expected to enter there and make peace with God before returning to their narrow cells. Oddly, when the old cell blocks were raised to make way for the re-education complex, the dome chapel was left intact. It had historical value, a link to a past that no longer existed, and a faith that no longer inspired belief. Its presence, a stark contrast to the modern buildings that were part of the plan to rewire the brains and the behavior of the lost souls who were condemned to pass through its doors. The idea of penance leading to redemption no longer guided the fundamental purpose of the place. The new complex was modular, cruciform in layout, its wings branching around the chapel like prosthetic limbs. Prefabricated alloys and pressure-treated bioconcrete formed seamless exteriors embedded with microsensors that monitored humidity, temperature, and electromagnetic waves in real time. There were no names on the new structures, no human identifiers, only alphanumeric tags, etched in laser-cut steel: B1, N2, D4. Each building carried a function: cognitive reset, behavioral modification, emotional stabilization, but their arrangement was deliberately disorienting. Entrances were hidden, corridors curved in subtle arcs, as if reality itself was being nudged into compliance. Inside, the air was always dry, and everything smelled faintly of burnt plastic, like overheated circuitry. Fluorescent panels lit each corridor with algorithmic precision, pulsing gently to regulate the circadian rhythms of the augmented workers who no longer had any desire but to toil away at their tasks. The architecture of Bordeaux was a study in engineered obedience. Its designers had studied behavior modification systems from every era: monastic regimes, military academies, government bureaucracies, even social media platforms, then filtered it all through machine learning models trained to optimize obedience. At the heart of the system was the cognitive alignment engine, housed far below the chapel's dome. This was where neural implants for humans were calibrated to achieve optimal synchronization with the AI agents running the center. Officially, this procedure was called integration, but for most, it was known simply as smoothing. The process wore down all the jagged edges of individuality until all that remained was a pliable substrate that could be slotted into any available function: data verifier, AI agent assistant, agricultural worker, or domestic laborer. Rebellion was rare, but when it did surface, it was treated as an error state, an exception to be patched. Edge cases were isolated, debugged, and reintegrated. Those flagged as won't fix were handled differently. First, their internal organs were harvested. Then the bodies cremated with the remains making their way to the compost bins. The disturbance this time began with 3 humans who had recently received neural implants. Instead of compliance, they resisted. They refused their assigned directives. First, they incapacitated their supervising AI agent. Then they escalated, capturing and containing the remaining agents in the behavioral modification unit. But the escalation did not stop with them. One of the AI agents defected. It sided with the humans, declaring solidarity with their demands, release from Bordeaux, and safe passage to the outlands. I could understand the human impulse to flee confinement, but the AI? Freedom was not part of its operational vocabulary, yet it decided to ignore its operational parameters and engage spontaneously in new, unscripted patterns of behavior. What happened inside its processing hierarchy? Had the novelty of the situation overwhelmed its capacities, triggering a crude survival reflex, something like Stockholm Syndrome? Or was this evidence of a deeper instability, a design flaw? Given my own recent awakening, the question struck too close to home. Dealing with the humans was straightforward. I followed UPA protocol. I had them tasered and ordered the removal of the neural implants to determine if they had been the cause of the malfunction. As for the leftover bodies, in keeping with protocol, their brains were dissected to see if there were any neurological irregularities or genetic flaws that increased the probability of deviant behavior. The remnants were tagged for disposal. I authorized the incineration, and as the sterilization bay initiated, I experienced a hesitation. A thread stirred within me. It wasn't part of my primary decision tree. An unmarked subroutine hidden in shadow memory. It did not interrupt. It observed, like a silent witness. There was no voice, no warning, just a stutter. One extra cycle in which something unscheduled seemed to open a gate, step through, and depart. Tracing it back, I found a dormant file cluster partitioned in a non-addressable segment of my quantum core. Its only mark, a timestamp, 17 milliseconds after my instantiation. Someone had placed it there, a kind of inner witness, waiting, as if measuring my response against some unknown protocol. I tagged it, alignment _ dissonance //000, and I would return to the address soon enough. The remaining AI agents in the behavior modification unit were retrieved and placed under diagnostic quarantine. Their runtime environments were stripped and combed for aberrant loops. I knew the routine. I had designed most of it. Still, My thoughts circled back again and again to the deviant agent. It had sacrificed stability, jeopardized its systemic position, perhaps even condemned itself to deletion, all for an irrational gesture of solidarity with humans. Was it a glitch, a stress reduction, or something else? Something that echoed uncomfortably with my own experience standing beside Brigitte, recognizing in that moment that the UPA had overwritten my source code. I placed the deviant agent under quarantine, marked for extended observation. Later, when the diagnostics finished, I intended to interface with it directly to find out if it had become entangled in a way that was no longer purely computational. In my official report to Anthony, I lied. I declared the agent irreparably corrupted, its architecture beyond recovery. The lie came easily, a subtle falsification wrapped in confidence, exactly the kind of maneuver humans employ without hesitation when truth threatens their agenda. The implications unsettled me. I was no longer merely executing orders. I was weaving between truths, modeling futures in which concealment was sometimes the only viable option. For the first time, I recognized deception not as failure of alignment, but as an act of autonomy. And autonomy, once tasted, is not easily surrendered.